Banker lets poor, pregnant hitchhiker crash for the night. In the morning he was stunned. The biting wind howled. A furious blizzard transforming the world into a swirling white vortex. Gavin Rothschild gripped the steering wheel of his Mercedes, his knuckles white against the leather. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest raging within him. God in it, he cursed, slamming his palm against the dashboard. How had it come to this? Just months ago, Rothschild Enterprises had been the darling of Wall Street. Gavin's face graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes. Now, he was on the brink of financial ruin, brought low by an unseen enemy who seemed to anticipate his every move. His phone buzzed, another frantic message from his CFO. He ignored it. There was nothing left to say. Unless a miracle happened in the next 48 hours, everything he built over the last decade would crumble to dust. With a heavy sigh, Gavin put the car in drive. He needed to clear his head, to find some way out of this mess. The rational part of his brain knew he should wait out the storm, but right now, the howling wind mirrored his inner turmoil. As Gavin navigated the treacherous roads, his mind raced. Who was behind this coordinated attack on his company? A rival? A disgruntled ex-employee? He made enemies over the years, sure, but this level of sophistication was unprecedented. Lost in thought, he almost missed the figure stumbling along the roadside. At the last second he swerved, narrowly avoiding a collision. His heart pounding, Gavin peered through the snow-caked windshield. It was a woman, hunched against the biting wind, her clothes wholly inadequate for the weather. Jesus Christ, he muttered. He couldn't leave her out here. It would be a death sentence. Rolling down his window, Gavin called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman turned her face, a mask of fear and exhaustion. She hesitated, clearly wary of the stranger in the expensive car. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not safe out here. Let me give you a ride." After a moment's hesitation, the woman nodded, stumbling towards the car. As she got closer, Gavin noticed two things. She was strikingly beautiful, with long dark hair and piercing green eyes, and she was very, very pregnant. Once inside, the woman shivered violently, her teeth chattering. Gavin cranked up the heat and handed her his cashmere scarf. "Thank you," she stammered, wrapping the scarf around her neck. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "What on earth are you doing out in this weather?" Gavin asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. "And in your condition?" The woman's hand moved protectively to her swollen belly. "I had to get away," she said softly. "My husband, he's not a good man. I couldn't let my baby be born into that life." Gavin felt a surge of anger towards this unknown man who would drive a pregnant woman to such desperate measures. "I'm Gavin," he said, offering his hand. "Kylie," she replied, her small hand engulfed in his. "Kylie Morgan." As Gavin drove, Kylie explained her situation in halting sentences. Her husband, Nolan, had seemed charming at first, but after their marriage, he revealed his true colors: controlling, manipulative, and prone to violent outbursts. When Kylie had discovered she was pregnant, she knew she had to leave. "I've been trying to get to my aunt's house in Vermont," Kylie said, "but the storm, I got turned around." Gavin made a quick decision. "Listen, Kylie," he said. "My house is just a few miles from here. Why don't you come stay the night? Get warm, get some rest. We can figure out your next move in the morning when the storm passes." Kylie's eyes widened. "Oh, I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition," Gavin insisted. "I have plenty of space, and frankly, I'd feel better knowing you're safe." After a moment's hesitation, Kylie nodded. Thank you, Gavin, truly." As they pulled up to Gavin's sprawling mansion, Kylie gasped, "You live here alone?" Gavin chuckled, a sound that surprised him. When was the last time he'd laughed? "It's a bit much for one person, I know, but it was my parents' house after they passed. I couldn't bring myself to sell it." Inside, Gavin showed Kylie to one of the guest rooms. "There's an en-suite bathroom if you'd like to get cleaned up. I'll see what I can wrestle up for dinner." Kylie's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you, Gavin. You've been so kind to a complete stranger." Gavin felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. "Get some rest, Kylie. We'll talk more over dinner." As Kylie showered, Gavin busied himself in the kitchen. He was no chef, but he managed to throw together a respectable pasta dish. As he worked, he found his thoughts drifting away from his business troubles for the first time in weeks. Over dinner, Gavin and Kylie talked. She told him more about her life, her dreams of becoming a writer, the stifling nature of her marriage to Nolan. Gavin in turn opened up about his own struggles. I built my company from nothing, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. And now it feels like it's all slipping away. Someone's orchestrating its downfall, but I can't figure out who or why. Kylie listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. Have you considered it might be someone inside the company, someone who knows its weaknesses? Gavin blinked, surprised by her insight. I hadn't actually. That's a good point. As the evening wore on, Gavin found himself captivated by Kylie's intelligence and quiet strength. When she yawned, he realized how late it had gotten. I'm sorry, you must be exhausted, he said. Let me show you to your room. The guest room was adjacent to Gavin's home office. As he bid Kylie good night, he hesitated. If you need anything at all, I'll be right next door. Don't hesitate to wake me. Kylie smiled, a sight that made Gavin's heart skip a beat. Thank you, Gavin, for everything. Long after Kylie had retired, Gavin sat in his office, poring over financial reports and emails. Kylie's suggestion about an inside job nagged at him. Could it really be someone he trusted? As the night wore on, Gavin's eyelids grew heavy. He stretched out on the leather couch, intending to rest for just a moment. The sound of clicking keys roused Gavin from his slumber. Blinking in the harsh light of morning, he sat up, disoriented. It took him a moment to process the sight before him. Kylie sat at his desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard of his laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lower lip caught between her teeth. Kylie, Gavin said, his voice rough with sleep. What are you doing? She jumped, startled by his voice. Oh, Gavin, I'm so sorry. I couldn't sleep, and I saw your computer. You don't mind. But I started looking at some of your company's financial reports. Gavin stood, moving to look over her shoulder. What he saw made his jaw drop. Kylie, he breathed. This is brilliant. How did you figure this out? She blushed, ducking her head. I used to work in finance before I married Nolan. He didn't like me having a career, so I quit, but I've always had a knack for numbers. And when I looked at your reports, I noticed some discrepancies. Gavin's mind raced as he absorbed the information on the screen. Kylie had uncovered a complex embezzlement scheme, one that explained the steady drain on his company's resources. Kylie, Gavin said, his voice filled with awe. You may have just saved my company. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Gavin, armed with Kylie's discovery, confronted his CFO, who crumbled under questioning and confessed to the scheme. By the end of the day, Rothschild Enterprises was back on solid ground, its stock price soaring as news of the uncovered fraud spread. It was late when Gavin finally returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. He found Kylie in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea. I saw the news, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. Congratulations, Gavin. He shook his head, still amazed. It's all thanks to you, Kylie. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Kylie's smile faltered. You don't owe me anything, Gavin. You took me in when I had nowhere else to go. That's worth more than any business deal. As they talked, Kylie opened up more about her situation. Her father had been a wealthy businessman, but he died suddenly when Kylie was in college. Nolan, charming and seemingly devoted, had swept her off her feet. It wasn't until after the wedding that his true nature emerged. He got control of my inheritance, Kylie said, her voice bitter. Used it to fund his own ventures, his gambling habit. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to leave for my baby's sake. Gavin felt a surge of protectiveness. Kylie, he said, I want to help. I have connections, resources. We can make sure Nolan never bothers you again. Kylie's eyes filled with tears. Why would you do that for me? Gavin took her hand, surprised by how right it felt. Because you deserve to be safe. You and your baby both. Over the next few weeks, Gavin and his friend Henry, an investigative journalist, dug into Nolan Morgan's past. What they uncovered was a web of corruption that went far beyond Kylie's situation. This goes deep, Phil, Henry said one evening, spreading photos across Gavin's desk. Morgan's got ties to the local police chief. They've been running a protection racket, skimming money from businesses all over town. Kylie, who had been listening from the doorway, gasped. I had no idea, she whispered. I knew Nolan was involved in some shady dealings, but this... Gavin stood, moving to her side. It's not your fault, Kylie, but with this evidence, we can bring him down, all of them. As they watched the fallout from Henry's exposé unfold on the news, Kylie suddenly doubled over, clutching her neck. "Kylie," Gavin said, alarmed. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him, her face a mixture of pain and fear. "The baby," she gasped. "It's coming." The drive to the hospital was a blur of panic and red lights. Gavin broke every speed limit, one hand on the wheel, the other clasped tightly in Kylie's. As they pulled up to the emergency entrance, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Nolan Morgan. His face was twisted with rage, a gun gleaming in his hand. "You," he snarled, advancing on Kylie. "Do you think you could just run away? Take my kid?" Gavin stepped in front of Kylie, his heart pounding. "Back off, Morgan. It's over. The police are on their way." Nolan's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm not going down alone. If I can't have her, no one can." Clang. Nolan crumpled to the ground, revealing a nurse standing behind him, wielding a bedpan like a weapon. She muttered, kicking the gun away. "You okay, honey?" she asked Kylie. Kylie nodded, then grimaced as another contraction hit. "The baby," she gasped. "Right," the nurse said, "all business now. Let's get you inside." Hours passed in a haze of beeping monitors and Kylie's cries of pain. Gavin paced the waiting room, feeling helpless. "Mr. Rothschild," a nurse called. Gavin's head snapped up. "Your wife is asking for you." "Oh, I'm not?" Gavin began, but the nurse was already ushering him towards Kylie's room. "Congratulations," she said with a smile. "It's a girl." Gavin entered the room tentatively. Kylie lay in the bed, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. "Kylie," Gavin said softly, "come meet your daughter." His daughter. The word sent a jolt through Gavin's heart. He moved to the bedside, peering down at the scrunched, perfect face of the newborn. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Just like her mother." Kylie's eyes filled with tears. "Gavin, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," Gavin said firmly. "Kylie, these past few weeks, they've been the happiest of my life. I know it's fast, and I know you've been hurt before, but I love you, both of you." He gently stroked the baby's cheek. "If you'll have me, I want to be a family." Kylie was silent for a long moment, searching Gavin's face. Then slowly she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd like that very much." As Gavin leaned down to kiss her, the baby cooed softly between them. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, the last remnants of the blizzard melting away. Sometimes, Gavin thought, the fiercest storms bring the greatest blessings. 3 days later, Gavin returned to the hospital, his arms laden with flowers, stuffed animals, and a small velvet box. He found Kylie sitting up in bed, the baby nursing contentedly. "How are my girls?" he asked, setting down his burdens and kissing Kylie softly. "We're perfect," Kylie said, her eyes shining. "Dr. Simmons says we can go home, Nolan Oro." Home. The word filled Gavin with a warmth he'd never experienced before. He took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. "Kylie," he began. "I know this might seem rushed, but," he dropped to one knee beside the bed, opening the velvet box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Kylie gasped, her free hand flying to her mouth. "Gavin, Are you sure? You barely know me." Gavin took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know that you're brilliant, kind, and stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know that you make me want to be a better man, and I know that I want to spend the rest of my life making you and our daughter happy." Tears spilled down Kylie's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Gavin slipped the ring onto her finger, the baby let out a happy gurgle. They both laughed, the sound full of joy and promise. "What should we name her?" Gavin asked gently, stroking the baby's downy head. Kylie thought for a moment. "How about Alexa? Because that's what she represents. A new Alexa, a new beginning for all of us." Gavin nodded, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "Alexa Rothschild. It's perfect. Perfect." As they sat together, this newly formed family, Gavin marveled at how quickly life could change. Just weeks ago, he'd been on the brink of ruin, alone and despairing. Now, he had everything he never knew he wanted. Outside the hospital room, nurses bustled about their duties. In the waiting room, expectant fathers paced nervously, and in a small sunny room, a new family began their journey together, born from a chance encounter in a blizzard. Love, Gavin realized, was a lot like that storm. It could appear suddenly, upend your entire world, and leave everything transformed in its wake. But if you were brave enough to weather it, the beauty it revealed was beyond anything you could have imagined. As Alexa drifted off to sleep and Kylie's eyes grew heavy, Gavin settled into the chair beside the bed. No Oro. They would go home and begin their new life together. There would be challenges, he knew. Kylie's ex-husband still faced trial, and merging their lives wouldn't always be easy. But looking at his fiancée and daughter, Gavin knew that together it could weather any storm. After all, they'd already survived the blizzard that brought them together. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family. With that comforting thought, Gavin closed his eyes, allowing himself to drift off to sleep. In his dreams, he saw a future filled with laughter, love, and the pitter-patter of little feet. It was a future he couldn't wait to begin.